dig deep for me on how pressure impacts performance. We're talking about choking here, which define choking. Let's get into the weeds, neurobiology of pressure, performance, all of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So pressure is just this. It's how we react to stress. So we can interpret that in multiple different ways. But when we look at stress, it's not good or bad. It's just our brain making a prediction for how do we handle the challenge before us. And I've talked about cortisol and testosterone and adrenaline. The best way to think about it is this. We have a bunch of levers we can pull, both from a hormonal standpoint, from a nervous system standpoint, and from like a psychological standpoint. And which lever we pull depends on our brain kind of saying like, what's going to have to help us survive this situation? So that's why if we look at stress or pressure, a little bit helps us perform well, right? We don't run our fastest in practice. We have to do it in a competition. Why? Because that pressure increases our what we call physiological arousal, which says, hey, body, prime your muscles to perform. Give me a little nervous energy or adrenaline to get my mind sharp and to essentially enhance the signal to noise ratio so we can see what we have to do clearer and the feedback coming in that helps us perform clearer. But what happens if we go too far or we pull the levers that our brain goes like, hey, standing up on that stage is going to be like a life or death event. Like if you mess up, your career's over. If that's the case, your brain's just going to go like, good, we'll make sure you don't get up there. And that's what all that anxiety or that fear or that rumination that, I don't want to be here comes from. So the bottom line is like stress isn't good or bad. It's just meant to prepare. But the degree of it, so how much we feel, and then the direction of it, meaning is it directed towards, seeing the thing as a challenge that I can take on and overcome? Or is it directed towards this is a threat and I need to avoid or protect? And protect could mean physically, but more so it means like, protect my ego, my sense of self from being embarrassed or damaged.
How do we, what determines the direction that goes in?
So a number of things. Again, some of it is like our biology and genetics, but a large part of it is, again, come back to that brain is predictive. What evidence is it using to predict? So if we're taking on some sort of task or pursuit, it's essentially, are we prepared for the demands that we're going to face? So if I sign up for a marathon and I've put in all the training and I've got a coach and I've followed my training program and I've done the work, my body rightfully says on the starting line, a marathon's going to kind of suck no matter what, but we can see that you've prepared. Therefore, we're going to go a little bit more challenge instead of threat. If instead, off of a lark, or I think, you know what, I'm a runner, I got this, and I don't train and I show up, your body is smarter than you. You might try and fake it until you make it, but it's not going to work. Your biology is going to go, yeah, you're not prepared. Like, think threat. We're going to try and convince you to drop out of this race by feeling overwhelming anxiety. So a large part of what way we go depends on, are we prepared for the demands of the task? So that means accurate appraisal of you, yourself, what you're capable of and what you've done. And then accurate appraisal of the task itself. Like, what is this going to challenge? And then the last part that plays a big role is essentially, is the juice worth the squeeze? Meaning, like, what are the risks and rewards here? The rewards, could be intrinsic, could be extrinsic, but like, what benefit do I get from this? And then what's the risk? If it is literally, I fail at this task and it's my job, we'll go to threat mode. If it's, I lose this game and yeah, that sucks, but I'm not a professional athlete or my life or career isn't dependent on this, I'll be more likely to go to challenge mode because like the threat is low and the reward is probably higher.
What was that study that they did with rugby players where they manipulated people that spoke to them before the event, before a match, something like that?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of fascinating work on rugby in this, where they look at all this stuff, and a couple of different studies, but one of my favorite is that they took rugby players and they essentially sat them down for a game and had them either prepare or look at what they did wrong the last game with a friend or a coach or a stranger. Okay. And when they sat down and looked at what they did wrong so that they could improve, going into this game, when they did it with a stranger, cortisol goes through the roof, testosterone plummets. When they did it with a friend or a coach who's supportive, testosterone goes up, cortisol goes down. But most interestingly to me is if that stranger was a big dude, so not skinny distance runner Steve, but linebacker, cortisol goes up through the freaking roof.
Okay? Even more than, right, okay.
Even more than if it was a skinny stranger. Why? Because a big stranger is way more intimidating. So our brain reads the room and environment and says this dude is big. I don't know who he is. We're watching me suck right now. Brain default to threat mode.